Figure out the name.
Hello, I'm Mallory.
And I'm Jen Ayers.
Welcome to Epidemiology Tonight.
Today we will be discussing the outbreak of water contamination in Flint, Michigan.
Yes, outbreaks. You know, the ones with the yellow hazmat suits and hungry, bloody zombies. But let's move beyond that 1995 film and our other misconceptions that outbreaks solely have to revolve around a viral infection that just happens to always be derived from an exotic monkey.
So, according to the World Health Organization, an outbreak is the occurrence of cases of disease in excess of what would normally be expected in a defined community, geographical area, or season. Basically, the existence of an epidemic and pandemic. These cases aren't just some exotic phenomena happening solely in developing countries. The United States is experiencing one of the biggest outbreaks and disease crisis it has ever known, the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Epidemiologists typically describe an outbreak with the when, where, and who of the cases that are reported. For the Flint water crisis, this is pretty self-explanatory.
Flint itself was a pretty bad mess up, and it was the product of many things going wrong together. Flint is one of the poorest cities in Michigan, with over 40% of its citizens living in poverty. To combat this, the governor of Michigan appointed an emergency manager to the city. This emergency manager could make cuts to different programs without any legislation or approval. On April 24, 2014, the new city manager made the switch of the city's water supply from Lake Huron to the Flint River. This switch was the absolute cataclysm of Flint's water crisis.
From three, two, one.
In the process of switching, the government then decided to not add the chemical orthophosphate in the water, an anti-corrosion chemical that would have prevented the eroding of lead pipes. Officials were oblivious to future possible consequences and even attempted to cover up the actions they took. This places an interesting twist in validating the government conspirators that live in the middle of nowhere.
The first issue that the city acknowledged was the fact that fecal coliform bacteria was detected in the Flint water supply. This was actually happening because the lead in the water was nullifying the effects of the chlorine, but this was not yet known. Residents were really encouraged to boil their water, but it was not entirely a massive issue. That water looks worse than the stuff that comes out of my sink in VCE. This is quite alarming because the presence of this bacteria could also have been indicative of a more ominous buildup of bacteria such as E. coli that can cause symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Now, once chlorine is added to the pipes, the boil advisories in some places were lifted. However, the city then warned that the byproducts of disinfectants could cause cancer in the future. Not good.
Why is this an issue, you may ask? The problem ended up being with the pipes. Specifically, the lead in the pipes could be described as the agent of the crisis. Regardless of all other decisions made, enforced, and manipulated, if the pipes had not been corroding and encouraged to corrode with dangerous chemicals in the water, the crisis could have been averted.
Oh, shoot, Jen. Most households in the United States use lead pipes, and while they are usually safe, in the case of Flint, small flakes began mixing with the water due to a lack of protective covering that the orthophosphate would have provided. Again, a seemingly obvious necessity to everyone except the public health officials of the now infamous Flint. The lead ended up leaching into the water, and even though countless studies and claims demonstrated that the mysterious illness that kids were contracting was lead poisoning, for some reason the data did not match with the city's statistics. Let's check with our team in the field, see what they have to say.
Thanks, Mallory and Jen. I'm here in Flint, Michigan with a resident. We just collected some water off of the reservoir. We're going to see how it tastes. So how was that?
Pretty metallic.
Back to you.
On February 25th, 2015, the Environmental Protection Agency announced that it has found dangerous levels of lead present in the home of Lee Ann Walters. And by September 8th, 2015, Virginia Tech had conducted an investigation that concludes the amount of 40% of Flint homes with elevated lead levels. Consumption of lead can have ramifications such as cognitive deficiencies, increased antisocial behavior, lower educational attainment, and a host of problems affecting the brain, kidneys, and liver. This news is especially precarious as a September 2015 study showed that the proportion of Flint children with high levels of lead in their blood had roughly doubled after the water change. Back to our team in the field.
Hey, so how are your kids doing?
Well, my kids haven't had clean water in too many weeks to count. And my oldest one was actually the first one to get sick out of the entire county. So I'm really scared there's going to be future ramifications. There's probably going to be cognitive delays and other problems that the mayor should address now before it gets even worse.
I agree.
Not good. Ladies and gentlemen, the massive amounts of water quality issues in Flint are something that the strongest Brita would have had immense difficulty filtering. The lead outbreak was not the most fatal thing in this case, however. An investigation shows that the presence of Legionella pneumophila bacteria in the water led to an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease during the 18 months that Flint drew its water from the Flint River in 2014 and 2015. Now, this may sound like an awesome disease that makes people into a Roman soldier or something, but let me tell you, it's not. Some symptoms of Legionnaire's disease, a severe form of pneumonia, include nausea, vomiting, and stomach discomfort. Other common symptoms include headache, muscle aches, chest pains, shortness of breath, and in severe cases, death. From this specific outbreak, over 90 people were sickened and 12 died.
The epidemiology curve recording the counts of Legionnaires in Genesee County from 2010 show a spike in reported cases when the water crisis began in 2014. There have been 87 cases of Legionnaire's disease and 10 deaths reported in Genesee County from June 2014 to November 2015, a marked increase from the normal 6 to 13 cases per year.
This report summarizes data collected from 42 confirmed Legionellosis cases that were reported May 2015 through November 2015. The final case included in the analysis had an illness onset at the end of October, but was reported through the beginning of November. Preventing what happened in Flint, frankly, wouldn't have been that hard. Water security is not a privilege, but a human right. And in this case, the biggest preventative measures that could have been taken was not making stupid decisions just to save a little bit of money.
In any case, once the decision to switch water supplies was made, other steps could have been taken. First, at the primary level, treating services for the water, which the community had been previously complaining about months before the issue was finally taken seriously, could have been employed. Orthophosphate treatment is a fancy term for just one option, and this basically entails coating contaminated pipes with this additive, which prevents the leaching of lead from the pipes into the drinking water, and thus, as you can presumably expect, out of the bodies of those drinking it. If this or other available water treatments, such as hyperchlorinating the water, had been used then, Flint might not have even happened, both in terms of lead poisoning and the subsequent Legionnaire's outbreak.
Would have been good.
Yeah.
Once the concerns of the Flint community were left unheard, other steps could have still been taken. If a community is complaining about poor water quality, wouldn't it be smart to check to see if the water quality is in fact harmful? Risk assessment procedures, particularly targeting children, could have been done. By testing for capillary blood levels, agencies could determine that yes, the water was an issue, and yes, steps had to be taken to fix it. Health professionals could have also performed lead screening on pregnant women and their fetuses, another population at high risk for health risks associated with lead poisoning.
But, of course, nothing happened. Primary prevention and secondary prevention were not used. That leaves us with only one type of prevention left, which is tertiary prevention. First and foremost... What? Okay.
Cold hand.
Okay. Primary prevention and secondary prevention were not used. That leaves us with only one type of prevention left, which is tertiary prevention. First and foremost, the source of the contamination had to be removed. Sorry, Flint officials, but this meant scrapping your plan to save money and going back to using water that is not contaminated with lead. For those who were already impacted, particularly children and pregnant women, but also all others who were contaminated, being fed healthy foods could help avert the issue. Because nutritional deficiencies can influence lead absorption, by ensuring proper amounts of iron, calcium, and zinc in their diets, more dark chocolate, sardines, and cheese, folks.
We love to see it.
Lead could have been kept out of the body. As a last resort, there is chelation therapy, known as the gold standard for treating lead poisoning. The downside? To use this type of therapy means that lead levels in the body are so high that cognitive impairment and other deficiencies have already begun.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Sick. I'm a researcher at the University of Michigan, and I will now be answering questions at this time.
Excuse me, doctor. Why is this happening in Flint?
It's a great question. If you look at this second map right here, it shows the amount of houses that are in Flint that were built before 1950, increasing their chances of having lead pipes and lead paint in their homes. Flint is already a struggling community financially, and they should be provided aid in order to remove this toxin from their own homes.
Dr. Sick, can you tell us what's going on in Flint?
Yes, I believe I can. The events happening in Flint at the moment are of great concern. All individuals in the community are at a heightened risk of lead poisoning, and I fear for the health of children and pregnant women in particular. Lead poisoning must be taken very seriously, as lead is extremely toxic and only small traces can lead to a heap of side effects, including permanent brain damage, miscarriages, and severe damage to the fetus's nervous system. The current amount allowed before any reason for concern is about 15 parts per billion, set forth by the EPA. If you look at the map that should be on screen, Flint, Michigan has already had a concentrated amount of cases of lead poisoning, and this should raise many alarms. I highly advise the community to immediately remove the source of lead and treat those who have already been affected. Right now, the agent is the lead in the water, the hosts are the citizens, and the environment is the lead pipes, or the pipes that have lead in them. Our team here at the UM, in the meantime, has also been conducting research to develop recommendations for those at risk of developing bacterial infections through their water sources. Many people are unaware that using filters to treat the lead in Flint's municipal water does not eliminate the presence of microorganisms. Some steps we suggest to reduce bacterial levels in the water include flushing pipes and filters for longer than usual and on a regular basis, as well as running filtered water for at least 15 seconds before collecting it for use. This will ensure Flint residents are not feeling ill to water they believe is safe. It is also recommended to continue monitoring for Legionnaire's disease, as this incubation period is about 2 to 10 days. It is important to keep up surveillance. This is all the time I have for questions today. I'll be back tomorrow.
Lead has been used for thousands of years for its durability and malleability. The Romans were one of the first to use lead pipes, and in the 1920s, the U.S. began using lead pipes as well. In addition to this, lead was incorporated into paint, gasoline, and even some baby formulas. However, at the end of the 20th century, the ill effects of lead were made so clear, and forced EPA regulations dismissed the use of lead in the household and set forth the lead and copper rule for drinking water, which is still used to this day.
Unfortunately, the infrastructure of lead still remains in many American homes and is largely affecting poor communities such as Flint. Lead poisoning can still happen on mass scales in cities such as Boston, New York, and DC, and it has, but it's not often in poor sectors where lead poisoning continues to be a burden. Really, it all comes down to neglect and a lack of resources. Most of the homes in these communities are a bit older and are more likely to have lead paint and lead pipes. The water may not be tested as regularly, and citizens might not have the financial resources to remove the lead-based paint in their homes. Flint had only 5% of its children tested for elevated lead levels, but in other parts of the U.S., such as St. Joseph, Missouri, that number can be as high as 15%.
Lead poisoning is a systematic problem in the U.S. and needs to be addressed on a mass basis by the EPA. Too many children in poverty living in the U.S. are at risk of stunted development because of only the water they drink or where in their communities they live. Flint is just one example of the lead poisoning that is happening on a massive scale. The government should be able to provide basic services that are not hurting its citizens. A mass public health initiative should be implemented in order to address this mass issue. I'm Mallory Hibble.
And I'm Jen Ayers.
Signing off.